The first 5 minutes of this video is going to go back into history and show you the demise of the federal government's attempt to have a Department of Education. If you are not interested in that, simply fast forward or play it on 2.5 speed, because the last 7 minutes, in my opinion, is probably the most important. But guys, sometimes you just have to sit down and listen to learn, and it's a very important video. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Starkey Farmstead. So I ran across some information about the Department of Education, about Common Core, that I knew I had to share with you. First off, if you Google, this information will never show up. I really had to dig deep and research for hours to come up with this, but I'm fixing to tie Bush, Clinton, Obama, and the Gates Foundation all together and show you how public education right now is 100% indoctrination of our younger children. So in case you never watched me, my name is Samantha. I am the owner-operator of a 2-acre farmstead in Louisiana. We are debt-free, we are organic, we are no-till. Also, I have a master's degree in education with 4 certifications to teach. I have a long history where education is concerned. So the information I found, I was able to fact check to make sure it is correct. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, turn me on, drive, and just listen, but I'm going to blow your mind. In 2010, there was a program called Race to the Top. Now, most people thought Obama came up with this, but really, it was the Gates Foundation pushing it. It is part of, and would eventually turn itself into, Common Core. Now, if you accepted the standards, your state got like $40 or $50 million. But if you did not accept the standards, you would have to pay to set your own standards that correlated with Common Core, and they would hold other funding from your state. So here are the states that bowed down and accepted Common Core. Only 4 states ever decided they would not accept Common Core. Then 5 states that did accept it later repealed it. So that's 9 states out of Common Core, leaving 41 states still applying Common Core standards across all age groups in public school today. So folks, if you would like to support this type of content where I show you the truth behind what's happening in our country, especially with things like the Department of Education, look in the top of comments. There's ways that you can support our channel. Even $1 helps me continue to be able to do this type of work. President Trump was correct when he says that the United States spends more money per student to educate them than any other state. I found it in this deep dive research paper that I will link it for you in description. Okay, so just find it there and you can go look at it yourself. Now, what does that mean? We spend all this money, but our kids are like 39 out of 40 countries right now. And why is that? So we have to go back in time just a little bit so I can show you the progression of the takeover of education in America. So Congress is the people that hold the purse in the United States federal government. In other words, they are the ones that spend the money. Okay? So even though states supposedly have control over curriculum, what they teach the children, how they assess the children, that type of stuff, Congress, by a Supreme Court justice ruling in 1936, Congress can indirectly, directly affect how states do education by refusing to give them money or by giving them money. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson decided that he was going to connect Congress and their spending to how many disadvantaged children were in each school across the United States. Now, this is my own personal opinion, but I believe this is why you see an increase in special needs children across the United States at that time. And then it just continued to increase through the years. What am I saying? As someone who holds a special ed degree and taught as a special ed teacher, the schools never want your children to leave the special ed program. They are not working to get your child to a regular ed level. They're working to keep your child in special ed because they get more funding. So Title I was founded and enacted basically saying if a child is falling behind in math or reading or writing skills, if the teacher identifies that this child is below the 20th percentile, the school will receive money to help with that child. So again, in my personal opinion, this is how that works. Why would schools work really hard to keep children above the 20th percentile if they get funding for children below it? So as usual, when the federal government steps in, it sounds like it's a great idea, but it incentivizes people to do less. Kind of like when the C shot was out and people were in hospitals and they got money for that. Wouldn't it have been a better program to say the people that you saved, you get, $100,000 every person that walks out the door, instead of saying we're going to give you $20,000 for everyone that doesn't? There you go. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. I know, I just sounded like I was just speaking facts. In 1989, President Bush and then Governor Bill Clinton got together. I thought they were enemies. You know how they all make it all like they enemies? No, y'all, they friends. Okay? These two sat down with probably a beer or some whiskey and decided that they needed to get together with all the other governors in the country and come up with 6 national standards for American students. And this is where the federal government really starts overreaching its constitutional place in education. So now the federal government is requiring every single state to turn in not only test scores for math, English, science, writing, they want it broken down by ethnicity, by race, by their sex. And then if the scores are not high enough, the federal government withholds funding. You guys see how all this was done over time? Nothing is ever done all at once because the people would push back. So it's like they take a frog and they put it into a pot of water and then they turn the stove on and they slowly raise the heat. That is what's been happening in America's education system. Now I'm going to finish it up. I know some of you are not interested, but the point I want to make to you is dismantling the Department of Education was a great idea. Tell me one thing the Department of Education actually has done. I asked that on TikTok and I got scholarships. And you are correct. They do handle grants and scholarships for college, but that could be handed off to another department. Why would we ever need 4,600 employees to handle just scholarships? Because see, the food that your child eats on free and reduced lunches goes through the USDA. HHS handles special needs for children. So what does the Department of Education do? It sits there and it judges states. It decides who's going to get what money and who is going to be fined for not having a school, with scores high enough that makes the federal government happy. So really, all it ever was a watchdog federal arm of the law, and it overreached its constitutional rights in so many ways, folks. That's what you have to understand. When you're talking to people and they're upset about the dismantling of the Department of Education, is that it was against the Constitution to begin with, especially the 10th Amendment. So the 10th Amendment, which is located in the Bill of Rights as one of the first 10 amendments in the Constitution, says that the federal government cannot overstep its boundaries where the state is. And the state is supposed to be over education. But slowly, using the Supreme Court's own rulings and using Congress's power of the purse, they manipulated states into forcing them to follow what the federal government wanted versus what the states wanted.
We want to keep the right people.
Absolutely.
And I said, I don't want to just say we're going to cut 50%. I want to cut the people that aren't doing the job.
Is this the first step on the road to a total shutdown?
Well, we're about to hear the answer from our newly confirmed Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. But before we do, it is important to know that the education department just sent out layoff notices to half of its workforce, which could mark the beginning of the end of the federal Department of Education. Now, about 1,300 workers are getting fired from the department, but the dismantling of the agency is actually worse when you dig into the numbers. So they will remain on payroll for about 90 days and receive full pay and benefits during those 90 days. So they're getting severance.
And not to be cruel or ugly, but how many of you have been laid off of jobs before? Did you even get a notice? Did you even get a severance package? And did it last for 3 full months? Most people would say no, unless you worked for a very large corporation making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, which these people do. So folks, this is where we have to say that the federal government is too large. Now, I saw Bernie Sanders live last night on TikTok at a university saying things like, we're going to build 400,000 affordable apartments, basically. Units is what he called them. We're going to make sure that Medicaid is free to all men, women, and children. And I'm thinking, no, Bernie, we're not. This is America. We are not a socialist country. We do not need the federal government involved in education of the students. We do not need the federal government involved in healthcare. We do not need the federal government involved in housing. Folks, do you want to look like Russia or China? Do you want to live in a 400 square foot apartment with 4 kids? Because that's where you're headed when the federal government gets involved. So hopefully this helped a few of you understand why I celebrate the ending of the Department of Education. I hope that you will share this video to educate more Americans about how, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was involved in turning our children into what they are today. Are you happy with what these children look like today? How they behave? Because if you are, there's the problem. Love you guys. Have a blessed day.